Hey, welcome back to Morning Joe. It is almost 7 o'clock in the morning. David Ignatius, I'd love to get your reaction to what the foreign minister said. I do. First, though, during break, I spoke with someone very high in the Trump administration. I'll just say intimately aware of all the details of the negotiations and a few insights that this person had, this administration official had, on what we just heard. The foreign minister said that there was at no time a demand for no further enrichment. What our negotiators told him was the president's position is no enrichment. But the burden is on you. If you think you can come back with a counter, the burden is on you to show us what safeguards will be put in place so you will have a nuclear program for power like every other country. Also said we want a detailed proposal. We've been talking about this for over a decade. We need it in a week, not in 3 years. That won't work. And finally, I was told by this administration official that the burden placed on the Iranians was a heavy burden because of the lack of trust, because, in the words of this official, they have broken every agreement with us that they've ever had. So, again, it's Donald Trump, the president, with a maximalist position. That was taken to the foreign minister. And the U.S. negotiators told the foreign minister, all right, you don't like this maximalist position? Convince us you can have a peaceful nuclear program. Now, with that from the administration in the last minute or so, and from what you heard from the Iranian foreign minister, if you could explain all of this to us.
So, Joe, that's very helpful to get during the commercial break, the other side of the negotiating table. Good on you. So what I heard from Foreign Minister Araghchi was a description of where they would like to go in trying to satisfy the demands that the administration official conveyed to you. He said, first, we're seeking a win-win deal. What does that mean? He said that it means that the U.S. will be confident that the Iranian nuclear program will be peaceful. And there are various strategies they've talked about to assure the U.S., especially on enrichment, that they have talked in the 5 guiding principles that Araghchi referenced about a temporary suspension of enrichment for 3 to 5 years until after Trump is no longer president, and then a process that would make enrichment part of a civilian consortium in the region, so that there would be controls to keep it out of the military sector. He talked a little bit about the modalities in which that might be arranged when he told you that he's been working with the head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, on technical arrangements that would allow the IAEA to come back and monitor both what's going on in Iran and the nuclear program, and presumably this process for a civilian enrichment consortium. Final takeaway for me, Joe, is he showed why it's difficult to negotiate with the Iranians. He's a very smooth diplomat. He knows exactly what his brief is. At the end of that, it sounded to me, both from his comments and what you heard from the administration official, that the gap is in fact narrowing, that you can see a pathway in which Iran would be able to satisfy the U.S. desire that there be effectively no enrichment for a nuclear program. That sounds like it can be finessed. There are other issues in this negotiation. Right. I haven't heard anything that reassures me about those. Nor have I heard enough, finally, Joe, to convince me that this huge armada, this enormous force the U.S. is putting in place, that they're ready to pull that back because they feel they've gotten such a significant set of concessions. I haven't heard that yet at all.
Yeah, it's funny. You had described the foreign minister as a smooth talker, a smooth operator, and that's what this administration official said he is. It's hard to nail him down. Again, just what you said. But this administration, and I would just say what I was told, we're not going to wait a couple of years like the Obama administration. They've got a week, and they've got to assure us that they can have a peaceful program. I want you and Ed Luce to talk amongst yourself on this issue. It sounds like we're back to the old Reagan motto: trust but verify. I think in this case, it's don't trust but verify. Why don't you two talk about how we get there? Ed, you start and ask David any question that you have about this process, how we get from where we are to that.
So, David, I was just recently in the Gulf earlier this week for a couple of days after Munich, and what was really clear to me from conversations I had was that none of them want war. A few years ago, all of them would have wanted the Iranian regime decapitated. Now what they fear is the destabilization being exported around the region, and of course, the fact that Iran can target their refineries in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, block the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think that is going to have any bearing on President Trump's decision of whether or not to go to war?
So, like you, I've been speaking with Gulf officials in the last several days and hearing from them the same concern about a war in which they feel they'd be the big targets. Let's not forget that during the 12-day war last year, Qatar itself was hit by Iranian missiles, or the U.S. base in Qatar, so they feel very much in the firing line. I think they do worry about an open-ended process. I think one thing that I take some reassurance from is the resumed role of the IAEA as a trusted intermediary, a party that both sides feel comfortable working with, that could provide, on-the-ground inspection to rebuild some regimen, as Joe put it earlier, in which you trust but verify. You have real verification on the ground. And I think that IAEA process has the support of countries in the Gulf, like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar. It has the support of the United States. And from what we heard from Araghchi, the Iranians, after pulling back, are now ready to re-engage with the IAEA. That's I think, the central point of progress that I heard today.
Ed, I'm wondering if you can clarify or maybe provide a fact check on something that stood out to me about what Araghchi said about the protesters. He claimed that only 3,000 protesters had died and that it did not match the number that is being publicly reported, which, to be fair, is different in different outlets, and it's hard to get a clear picture because of the internet restrictions the regime has put on civilians. But what have you heard about the protester situation? And at this point, does having any sort of kinetic action, even in a limited strike, how does that help protesters now?
So, I mean, the numbers it's really hard to verify or counter what Foreign Minister Araghchi said, that 3,000 or so number, precisely for the reasons you mentioned. The internet's off, and there are no independent monitors wandering around Iran. But other estimates from various different sources range from 6,000 to 30,000. And so you've got a pretty wide range there. And if you talk to some of the anti-regime people, particularly those around Reza Pahlavi, the son of the late Shah, who looks like he wants to go back in and has become a kind of a symbol of the protesters, they have a lot of anecdotal evidence of much, much higher numbers, and no anecdotal evidence of policemen being executed, as Araghchi just mentioned. And sorry, your other question was?
At this point, it seems like the window to help protesters has passed Trump. So what is the objective here?
See, the problem with, as everybody knows, the cliche is when you go to war, you lose control over the narrative. Up until that point, you decide when you go to war, how you go to war, but once you've gone to war, and the supposition that we could decapitate the Iranian regime, and then there would be this void that would be filled by, a democracy of some sort, or a more pliable regime, is, I think, complete fantasy. The history of such interventions is not an encouraging one. Equally plausible, although that could happen, but equally plausible is, that this strengthens the hardliners, the Revolutionary Guard, and gives them a tighter grip, and also enables them to quash that sort of anti-regime sentiment because everybody rallies around the flag. And that is indeed, the history of Iran in 1979, 1953, that foreign interventions tend to unite Iranians. So very, very hard to imagine that Trump's got to be able to, via remote control, shape what kind of politics emerges from this.
Yeah, John Heilman, I'm curious your reaction to what you have heard this morning from the Iranian foreign minister, as well as the White House officials' response, and how are decision makers on Capitol Hill going to be responding to all of this? Is there talks of negotiations moving on over the next week, and yet at least the appearance of a possible imminent strike on Iran?
Joe, we started out the show talking about Republican reaction to Donald Trump's appearance in Georgia yesterday. I think to the extent that David Ignatius and you and Ed are right that there may be an opening here to back away from any kind of military confrontation, will be greeted with a degree of relief on Capitol Hill. There's not a lot of, there's many people who would like to see a democracy in Iran. I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle share Ed Luce's skepticism that that's going to be, that this looks anything like, that's achievable in any kind of predictable or stable or meaningful way, and that an intervention in this case would look anything like the kind of operation that we saw in Venezuela, where at least at first blush, there hasn't been any kind of cataclysmic fallout from that. Republicans on the Hill, Democrats will be critical if there's any kind of intervention in Iran, if there's a strike there. Republicans will likely support Donald Trump, but will not be enthusiastic about it. They would like to see the White House focused on domestic matters and don't see this as improving their prospects in any way politically, especially with a Republican base that still is highly skeptical about foreign intervention and using any kind of force abroad. So I think to the extent that there's a possibility here, it's kind of at least the outlines of averting a strike, that will be greeted with some measured sense of relief on the Hill today.
So, David Ignatius, before we go to break here, I'm curious what your thoughts are. It seems the reward for regime change may be high. The risk of regime change also high. As you've said, we lose control in a situation after the first shot is fired. I'm curious. I mean, Iran, as I said at the top of the show, is not Venezuela. If there is a military strike, many people believe that one is coming. If there's a military strike against Iran, what are your greatest concerns, not only in the present, but basically what the tail of this might look like?
So, Joe, I think, as always, my concerns are about the unintended consequences. You launch war, hopefully with a better definition of what your end goals are. But even if that is defined, and it would need to be before the president took the United States into war, there's no way to be certain. The enemy has a vote. Things happen. There are shots on, let's imagine, the United Arab Emirates or Qatar that do significant destruction. Americans are killed in the many bases we have in the region, and then we're in a very different war. It's long, protracted, and Iran is a big, proud country. I visited there several times. Every time I go, I come back with that feeling reinforced. I think we heard some things this morning that sketched for us what a deal might look like that would satisfy the American desire, the assurance that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. We did hear a little bit of that. But I have to be honest, I didn't hear enough that I would imagine this White House turning that enormous armada around and saying, oh, boy, we got it. We're there. I didn't hear anything like that yet. So as much as I'd like to turn the temperature down on this crisis, I think based on what we heard, we can see the way forward, but there's going to have to be a greater reassurance by Iran to satisfy the fundamental demands of the United States and its allies. Europeans may be silent now, but I think generally in the region and in Europe, there's a feeling this regime is long in the tooth. It's been a menace to its own people and to the region, and there need to be fundamental changes.
And there is, and you look at the lower third, White House to Morning Joe, burden on Iran. That's a heavy burden as well. There is skepticism, but hope that the Iranians will come back over the next week with proposals that can provide real assurances that the program will be peaceful. The Washington Post's David Ignatius and Ed Luce of the Financial Times, thank you all both very much for being with us. We greatly appreciate it.